Okay, it looks like we're ready to begin our meeting. This is a meeting of the Mountainland MPO Technical Advisory Committee. The date is July 26th, and the time is approximately 1:35. My name is Brad Kennison, the chair of this committee, and we wanted to remind everyone this is a public meeting. So I'm curious, do we have any public comment that's coming, anyone in the public here, or any public comment that's come in from staff?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay, no public comment this time, so we will move to the second item on the agenda. We appreciate all of your patience. This is a kind of a first for us, holding both an online and an in-person meeting. So if you're having any problems hearing or anything, let us know. But with action item number 2 is an approval of the meeting minutes from April 26th and June 30th. First of all, do we have any discussion or any questions on the meeting minutes from April 26th? If not, I would be willing to entertain a motion on the meeting minutes for that meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes for April 26th. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
Jason Bond.
all right, we have a motion to approve and a second to approve the meeting minutes for April 26th. Go ahead and take a vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay. Moving on then, the second action item, part of action item number 2 is to approve the meeting minutes for June 30th, 2021. Any questions on those, on that meeting? Okay, I would accept the motion at this time then.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Oh, and your name again?
Nassim Gandor.
Nassim? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any seconds?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, looks like those meeting minutes were approved then. We'll move on to action item number 3 then, the North Lake Shore Area Study Conclusion from Sean Elliott. Sean?
Thank you. Okay, Chad, if you can pull up our webpage. Go to planning for growth. Go down to transportation studies at the bottom. Lake Shore Area Study. Okay, so
Did everybody see this online?
Could you get
We're
Chad,
still seeing the agenda.
could you get Chad closer to a mic?
You need a screen share.
All right. I need to take the screen over, that's why.
And it sounds like, Chad, they're having a hard time hearing you, so.
Okay. Can everybody see that now? See the webpage?
Yes,
okay. And can you hear me?
yes.
Am I close enough to the microphone? Okay. So the North Lake Shore Area Study started back in, I believe, 2019, 2018, actually, right before COVID. We partnered with UDOT in applying a new study process that they have called Development Solutions. This was used for corridor studies in Park City. I think Heber did one. And as we worked through the process, we found that it was a lot more difficult to look at a large area as we were looking here from Orem all the way up to Eagle Mountain. And so we had to do a lot of improvising. The process, and I'm going to have you scroll down, that's Chad, go to the executive summary. So the process basically was to look at the area with a regional scope, with a regional eye. We had numerous public meetings, and what I mean is the internet, we had stakeholder meetings and so forth. We received over 7,000 comments of what people thought should happen in the region. In the end, I think the part that didn't happen as well is going back to the individual cities and working through those channels. We started this study, we knew that we have a traffic problem in this area, meaning in the future, and even today, we have a lot of volume of trips that traverse this area. And so this process that we embarked was to try to, one, identify what kind of facility should we do, but then also to bring consensus between the communities. There's a lot of different ideas of what should be built in this area. No, sorry, am I off?
Getting a torso shot of you and not your
Oh,
head.
sorry.
So better proceed.
Is that better or worse? Anyway, so what's on the screen before you is the summary results of the study on our website. Again, the dots there that show what were the values from the community, and this is the region that was pulled. Transportation and access, obviously this was looked at as a transportation study. Pioneer Crossing right now is already at freeway volumes, Bangerter volumes and speeds, and so people are seeing a need for something to be done there. So, and then social and cultural were the other thing. People like where they live and they're afraid of what's going to happen in the future, right? How's it going to change? And so you'll scroll down just a bit.
Oops. Sorry, super sensitive about that.
Okay, so part of the study was to look at guiding principles for the study. And again, we developed this with stakeholders and also from the input from the public. They wanted a reliable, connected transportation system, protect and preserve open space in the environment, promote the well-being of residents, maintain culture, improve accessibility to employment, goods, services, and recreational opportunities, and collaborate regionally to identify and implement solutions. So those were the guiding principles. And then they also developed what are the needs in the area, manage growth, increase capacity of the roadway system, expand public transit, develop active transportation, and acknowledge environmental visual safety. And so as the study team went and looked at different scenarios that were developed in the meetings, they applied these to them to be able to try to measure what is the best outcome of those scenarios. You can scroll down. Okay, so I'll go right to the recommendations or the scenarios that we did. We looked at travel demand management and transit. So we looked at what if 20% of people stayed home from work or worked at home, I guess. What would that do? And I'll tell you, it did pretty good, meaning we didn't have many transportation problems. So today, Wasatch Front wide, there's about a 7% work at home. And when I say today, it's before the pandemic, of course. We don't know where we're going to land after the pandemic, right? 7% was very high. Most places, the national average is about 3 to 4% in the country. 10 years ago, we were at 4%. And so we did a big jump in the last 10 years. We're not sure why, other than maybe high-tech growth or what have you. And so in that scenario, we felt very uncomfortable going with a 20%. We had no data to support that we would be 20% in the future. What happens is if you do something like that and you end up at 12%, then suddenly you're under planning what your future needs are. And so that was our concern with that scenario. That scenario basically looked at widening Pioneer Crossing to a 4-lane arterial or expressway like it is now. Building Pony Express Parkway as a 4-lane arterial, the orange line. And then we looked at 3 different transit solutions. and modeled them separately to see which ones performed the best. And these were what I'd call high frequency transit, so BRT or light rail through the area. And then we looked at the Lake Bridge over into Provo and Orem to model all of those in that scenario. The sad conclusion was that these higher frequency transit items did not work in this area, mainly because of the densities that are there now and that are planned in the future. Our I-15 core throughout the Wasatch Front is some of the highest densities in the entire metro area. And that works well for transit, and that's why that backbone is working. But this area, by 2050 at least, we still don't see those high frequency major transit facilities working. We do show core route, which is again, it's a bus that's a step below a BRT, but that's probably the solution, at least in those many years. But that was the conclusion of at least looking at the transit. We even beefed up land use to try to make it work, and it was just,
That was one of my questions.
yeah, we
How do you account for, it's, land use is obviously going to change as far as zoning and different plans, right?
Right.
If you were to look at the densities that were in the approved documents even 10 years ago,
right,
crazy low density,
Right.
right? So we know that even though there's certain politics and things now that
Right.
20 years, 10 or 20, 30 years from now, everyone's land plans are going to be way more dense than
Right.
now, which is when you're looking for the study period. So how do you take that into account?
So in our current transportation model, when we meet with the cities for the long range plan process and so forth, we take your plans, but then we meet with you and say, well, what are we not getting from your plan? Then we go above that, and we've been using the Wasatch Choice for 2050 centers, which is basically areas that have been chosen of more intense development to try to augment the fact that cities usually aren't planning for an urban future. They're planning more towards the now, right? We show by 2035, the eastern part of Utah County, and so basically less Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain, is built out, meaning their current plans don't handle any more development. And so in our process, we do add more development based off of the fact that these areas do start to grow up when they're done growing out. And so in this area, there are those kind of applications applied to the densities. But even with our process, it didn't show that it worked. And so then we went in and added more at train stations that were proposed, and it still didn't work. And really what you need is not just in these clustered areas around the stations, you need more density within probably a 5-mile area. If you look at our transit now, a lot of people do park and ride or kiss and ride. They're not riding the bus to the train, right? And so anyway, that's what we did to a level that we thought would be acceptable by the cities in those clustered areas. You're right, another 5-10 years from now, those plans will change, and maybe they'll give us a better look at what we could do with
And if
transit.
you look at the track station in Draper,
Mhm.
it's not a high density area anywhere close to there. There's not density
Right.
at all. Now that maybe that doesn't,
It
maybe that
doesn't-
wouldn't even meet this.
Right,
They built it for other political reasons, obviously,
Right.
not because of transportation engineers.
Right.
So
right.
and theoretically could happen here.
Right. And Dre, it's interesting, the end of the line station, like Provo commuter rail is very heavily used, but that's because there's a big population south of it. And Draper, though, is one of the lower volume stations. And so that was more because it was already on the tracks and it was,
I think those were
The
existing
political
rail
thing.
lines.
Mhm, mhm. So that was the transit portion, and it was eliminated for further study. The Pioneer Crossing Freeway scenario, number 2, was recommending that Pioneer Crossing convert into a grade separated expressway freeway facility. It's carrying about 45,000 trips a day today, which is Bangerter volumes. It's well over 100,000 in the future is what it models at. In that scenario, we also looked at Vineyard Connector, the orange line coming to the south, also becoming a freeway. Interesting part there is there are improvements to I-15 that could be done, or it could be this parallel facility. And so the study says, we studied this, it works, but we also know there's got to be more work, of what is the future of I-15, which will hopefully happen in the next 5 years or so. The regional transportation plan talks a lot about that. So we have in that scenario Pony Express Parkway as an arterial corridor, and the bridge over Utah Lake, we have that in there. Now, we did different scenarios to test out if the bridge works, if we could build that bridge and not do anything through the Lehigh area. And the answer is no. It's just too far away from where those people are going and so forth. I had someone at Lehigh, I can't remember who asked me this question now, but it wasn't you. Asking about, well, what if, what does it do if we just build the bridge? And so we were looking at the different corridors through Lehigh, and it puts a lot more traffic on Main Street. And then also Pioneer Crossing is back at that failure rate, even with Pony being built as an arterial. So those are tests we wanted to do to make sure that, before we say you need this large facility, this is what needs to happen. The third option was making Pony Express a freeway. We looked at various or different options on that. One basically on the current corridor, 1900 South Lehigh, and then two other ones crossing in the lake right off the shore. In the end, this solution, it carries similar volumes to Pioneer. It's a little bit lower. The fact that there's not as much connectivity and it's not in the middle of Lehigh where people live type of thing. It basically becomes a bypass of Lehigh. So Lehigh is not getting the benefit, but it does carry close to those same volumes. The portions that, I'm not going to go into big detail, but it came down to then wetland issues, relocation issues. Pony Express almost had double in all of those different settings. So
When you say double, are you saying double
the impact.
the impact as in a fiscal impact or?
No, so if you want to scroll down just a bit, Chad. So this one here, let's see, when you look at the less potential impact to open space, so it's impacting about 93 acres on the Pioneer. Pony is 198 acres of open space impact. And then when you get into the wetlands, you go from 15 to 19 to 23 to 29. The special soils are 0 to about 4 acres. Those are big ones, meaning Army Corps frowns on those big time. And then the canal, it went from 34 to 84. Down a little bit further, Chad. On residential homes, it goes from 30 to 39 to 60 to 72, 142 to 173 for future residential versus 204 to 247 and so forth. So that was one of the reasons they didn't propose that it move forward because of the impacts. UDOT, their environmental group, was part of this study, and their comment was, we wouldn't even take that to the Army Corps because we have to take them the least damaging alternative when it comes to relocations, when it comes to the wetlands and so forth. The other thing that was a negative with Pony versus Pioneer is if you build Pony as a freeway, Pioneer Crossings volumes drop down into the teens, meaning 15,000 trips a day, which is collector volume. And so you're basically, because it's only 0.9 miles away from the current UDOT facility, you basically end up plagiarizing the traffic off of that. Not plagiarizing, taking it away, right? So those were all the different things that were looked at on that. I will say, and as I said at the beginning, one of the things I wish the study would have done better is at bringing the communities together, because I think we're still not there. Lehigh is not in favor of Pony or Pioneer, I'm sorry. I think the cities to the west are not thrilled with a bridge coming into their community type of thing. And so more work has to be done on that part. But at least we took a good look at what are the environmental constraints and what are the, how they function and that kind of thing.
So a question from the Lehigh standpoint, I spoke with our mayor today, and as you mentioned, Lehigh's not in favor of just going right with the Pioneer Crossing scenario. Our feeling with the study is that the study should have done a better job of looking at the fiscal impacts also. And I'm not sure, maybe you can address how much of the fiscal was looked into. And also, like you said, as far as getting the 4 cities together, whether it be Lehigh, American Fork, Saratoga, and Eagle Mountain, seems like from what Mayor Johnson said today, they're like on very different paths, right? There's not consensus as to which alignment should be done.
Right.
And so maybe you can help answer that, because I know when I spoke to the mayor today, his understanding was that the study was stalled and that we didn't have a final solution. And so he was super surprised that we would even bring it to the committee and say, well, this is what the
Right.
study determined.
So bringing it to you is information only. The consultant is done at this point, right? If we need to do future studies, so for instance, I know that MAG is working with you and Avenue and the other cities to come up with an alignment for the Pony Express alignment, meaning for an arterial.
Who's doing that?
Avenue, and Sean Seeger's been working
Is
on
that just barely?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're just asking the city managers if they want to work together to determine an alignment for Pony. Because we think you could build Pony as an arterial with local funds. But there's some mismatches at the borders that we need to resolve. So our idea is to try to use Avenue Consulting to resolve those mismatches on Pony as an arterial. And see if that's something that we can push a little bit further to get resolution. I think we can. I think we're pretty close.
But in doing so, I think what you are saying is that it still follows the model of Pony Express being a freeway and Pony being an arterial, right?
Pony being an arterial, and we don't know what to do with Pioneer from
Well,
a regional transportation.
Would it be more correct to say it's silent on what the classification would be and it's an alignment, but
Yeah.
whether that's a arterial or freeway, the alignment would be the alignment. Now, there could still be disagreements on the alignment, but at least it could
It's
be,
about purpose and need of the facility.
doesn't need to necessarily be definitive on the classification, I guess.
Well, I don't know. The study seems to indicate that we would not consider Pony being anything more than what you may call an arterial. It wouldn't be, it would definitely, according to the study, it wouldn't move forward as even potentially a freeway.
Now, to clarify, your city's or your mayor's or city's position isn't necessarily that Pony should be the freeway.
Correct.
It should be maybe a different alignment than even.
Possibly, yes. In fact, I think we would, if you maybe scroll back up, we just felt like that it seemed to make more sense. See, if you look on the right-hand side, it talks about the Pony Express Freeway. That one is called out as not recommended for further study.
Where it goes out to the lake. right?
When it goes out in the lake,
Yeah.
or even using Pony as more of a freeway.
Any of those.
In this case, we just move forward with Pioneer Crossing being the freeway. And I think that's, when I talked to the mayor, that's the big concern there is,
Yeah.
you know, we didn't look at Pioneer Crossing, to my knowledge, we didn't look at it from a fiscal standpoint, you know, from a costing standpoint.
That's right.
What would it really cost to put interchanges on
Right.
Pioneer Crossing through a developed neighborhood, right? I mean, that was super expensive.
And we are not recommending that Pioneer become a freeway. We're just saying this is the results of the consultant work with the study, saying, how do we handle this much volume? Now I have to take it through the city's regional transportation planning process and UDOT's planning process. And we say, we don't have resolution on how to move people east-west from the north end of Utah Lake.
Man, that was kind of,
What do
I know Saratoga sponsored this study initially through last year's STIP or whatever. And that was like one of the main things we wanted to come out of it. Maybe that was a little too rosy glass, but it would be that all the TMPs would have consistency
We
on all the four
tried.
cities.
We tried and we
Not,
couldn't
not
get
for lack
there.
of effort, right?
We couldn't get there on Pony because UDOT made it explicitly clear that UDOT's future investment will be on 2100 North and Pioneer. And that they could not even take something like a freeway on Pony to the environmental review committees because they won't even accept it because there's other alternatives that are less.
I mean, each city has no obligation to change their TMP, that's the local preference. And then as far as this year's upcoming projects, cities can still, I guess, apply for funding on Pony as local
Oh, yeah.
projects to get STIP funding.
Whatever the alignment of Pony may be determined to be.
In their individual TMP. Now, what would be sad, obviously, would be to invest money in conflicting alignments, right? So it's one thing to put money into whatever your city wants for Pony, but if two cities are putting money in a way that contradicts and one of them's gonna end up being a waste of money, that would be,
Hopefully you would.
we would want to
explore
avoid that, obviously. We haven't, I don't think we've reached a situation like that yet.
Hopefully, Jeremy, that would come out during a discussion with TAP committee, that these two cities have not agreed on the
In
lane.
in theory, that would be the goal of the study, was to avoid that situation occurring in the future. We're getting closer and closer to that happening, and until those TMPs are consistent.
On Pony, I think we're almost there. I think we can do it. You know, with a little push.
So, Sean, so I wasn't unaware that kickoffs or that study that you just mentioned with Avenue, is that something that's just getting ready to kick off? They're gonna have a kind of an initial meeting
Yeah.
soon, or?
It's more informal, meaning all the cities in that area have Pony Express on their transportation master plans.
Yeah.
It's just some line up slightly different, you know, at their city junctions. And so it's a little bit of a facilitation effort from Avenue that I'm looking for, to see if we can get this, the 4 cities in agreement.
Well, you know, we're on board, so
Yeah.
for sure, I just, you know,
Yeah.
not to belabor the point anymore, we had a real good conversation, great support from Sean and Sean through all of this, but, you know, for the record, American Fork has a lot of concerns about the conclusion. And no sense rehashing it now, but just so everyone else knows.
What were the traffic numbers in scenario 2, as far as vehicles on Pioneer and vehicles on Pony?
Oh, boy. They are around 120,000, I believe, and I'm in the line of teams.
On Pioneer.
Pioneer was 120, and then the other was about 10,000 less. So they're moving regional travel, they both work, right? It's
You said Pony in theory, where that would have been 110, you said, over 100,000?
yeah, they're both over 100.
If Pioneer were turned into the freeway.
Right.
And is
So-
that,
And that includes a lake crossing at
Right.
Pelican
and
Point.
and the 5-lane accommodates the 10,000 less? What, I mean, does the arterial doesn't fail at that traffic load?
Oh, no. I'm talking as a freeway with those volumes. So if you build Pioneer as a freeway
Right.
and Pony as an arterial,
Right.
Pony carries about 15,000 trips a day.
That was my question.
Right. Okay, sorry. I thought you meant.
I hear, now I understand your answer.
Right.
And you're saying that if the study shows that if Pony Expressway were the freeway, that Pioneer goes down to 15?
They're just too close to
It
each
was
other.
only slightly less, right? So
Right.
that freeway was 100, about 10,000 less, so it's almost the same as the other location, slightly
Right.
less because
So-
you have
so
less
tr-
loading from the.
Traffic was not a deciding factor on, will one of these work to carry large volumes of regional traffic? It was the location so close to each other, right? And then all of the environmental and relocations. On cost, you're right, we did not get into cost. When we looked at ownership along Pioneer Crossing, UDOT owns a lot of that land. And so the amount of homes that would have to be, relocated or removed versus a bridge over the lake, at least from UDOT's standpoint, it would cost a lot more to build a bridge over the lake than it would to
On the
take up.
north end of the shore.
Right.
But the study did conclude that they would have to acquire additional right of way beyond what exists on Pioneer.
Oh, yes. And that's where it talks about the different, how many potential impacts to the built environment.
What was the approximate change in width? How much extra width did it have to go to say, did it get that level of detail?
In the study itself, there's a map that we produced and used GIS to come up with what properties would need to be taken out. I don't remember the width itself, but I know it was less than 300. We weren't looking at a large footprint with collector distributors or frontage roads on the side. So, but it was 4 lanes in the end, each direction. Yeah, the one telling part too, though, is if we don't ever build a bridge over Utah Lake to Provo and Orem, which is also a big question mark, it just makes things worse up in this area, right? So
Sean, what was the volume on the bridge from Pelican Point over to Provo North?
it was in the 70 to 80,000 range. So it is carrying a lot of traffic. And again, as I think I said earlier, if you build it on Pony, the freeway, or you put it over the lake off the shore, then traffic in Lehigh, especially up further Main Street and that kind of thing, starts to get worse than it is now. So those are all in the report. And if you want to go back to our website, I can just show you they're all there. We do know as we work with the cities to this next long-range plan, we're going to work with you and UDOT to talk through this more. Currently in the plan, there's a big section that talks about the need for traffic moving through this area. And it's located on Pioneer, but it also says we know that we did that for modeling purposes for it. And so, we'll have more discussion to try to make that work.
Is there a time for comments? Open to other comments too? One thing that would be interesting, 5-foot diameter pipe that's under the, like crossing right now,
Mhm.
on the edge of it, goes in the middle of the lane.
When you say edge, you mean one side of the road?
South side.
Okay.
Your preference is to widen it to north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, we just did a potential impacts. Future environmental would really look into which side do they really need to go on type of thing. I don't remember if we took the north or the south right now, but
Vineyard connector is now called 40 Express.
no, it's separate. Yeah, they would just tie into each other. So at this point, though, we're not as worried about the water line. It will be taken care of. If that's the thing that makes it so they can't go to the south, then they'll look at the north. The impacts were similar.
We'll get to that level of analysis in the environmental impact statement if it ever got to that.
Right.
What's the time frame? When does the capacity in the current facility get to a critical point where they have to?
Well, it's already there. I mean,
Which facility?
Pioneer.
yeah, Pioneer's 45,000 a day. Bangerter is already converting over to a freeway at 45,000 a day. So the interesting thing here is coming out of Saratoga and Eagle Mountain and Lehigh area, we have about 50-50 split in traffic. Half them go north, half go south. And so the question is, why doesn't 2100 north work? And that's part of the reason is this split. It works, but it's carrying those people that are going north.
UDOT is already funding or talking about, or that's on Zoom, about making grid separated at Pioneer and Redwood.
UDOT is on the line. UDOT wants to answer.
Is there any clarity on that? Is that funded? Is that just theoretical still? Matt,
Are you there with UDOT?
I am here.
Okay.
So Sean, how does transit fit in with these scenarios? Transit corridors, preserving corridors for transit, future transit, impacts that transit may have to additional right of way, those kind of things. Is that going to run a parallel with Pioneer?
So we will continue to show in the plan the current transit projects like core routes and so forth. And we will also show in their future need for a high frequency type transit through the area. Let's see, getting that corridor down is still, we have the same problem with transit in this area. One city shows it a little bit off and another city shows it a little bit off. So the recommendation is that we continue to try to get those connected and plan for that future. We're just not showing that it would be needed in the next 30 years. So Matt, the question was at Redwood Road and Pioneer Crossing, is UDOT looking at a grade separation of that intersection?
When we did the traffic modeling for the CFI, we saw the need for a future grade separation there. Yes. So sorry, what was that?
That's without a freeway, of course.
Yeah, and I don't know that all the signal or all the intersections would need that, but we were for sure seeing that there. And so when we sold property, we withheld some of that property to be able to make that grade separation without going back and buying it again.
any discussion on a potential?
On a potential what?
When that would occur?
I don't know. Beyond 2030. Because we're funded out that far now.
It's kind of contradictory, right? You're saying Pioneer's out of capacity, and I'm hearing UDOT's not going to do anything for 8 more years.
Well, not a grade separation.
Yeah, well, and zooming back out to Pioneer as a whole, if we're already getting the point of capacity.
Yeah, and I think we've looked at some options of widening it out to 3 lanes in each direction and kind of doing minimal widening to be able, or any, to be able to fit it in the existing corridor.
Didn't we already talk about those widening to 3 lanes in one of our past tax meetings?
Yeah, UDOT looked at restriping it, taking out the median. There will be impacts at intersections though, and they haven't done enough design work on that to say what that would be. But, you know, that having a right turn straight through movement on a 70-mile average speed wouldn't work too well in that area. So yeah, they have talked about that, but I don't think they've put cost to it or really designed it pretty. Do you know, Matt, if you've done any more design work on that?
I don't know about that for sure. Yeah, I don't think we've done any detailed work on that.
Our last legislative session, tell me if I'm wrong, Sean, but I thought we were trying to put in there that we would do an environmental for that corridor so UDOT could move forward with a staged approach type of thing.
Yes.
Did that get funded?
Did not get funded.
Okay.
So if that's something the city would like to see us pursue, it's something that we could work with UDOT on. So maybe we work with UDOT on an environmental on Pioneer to restripe to go to 6 lanes, 3 lanes each direction. And we then pursue an alignment on Pony, so you guys can apply for MAG funds to get your projects funded.
I mean, there's certainly some serious congestion issues on Pioneer at certain peak hours. And if no one's doing anything to get something going, it seems like we should take that initiative and get someone going on something.
I think so.
So it seems like a logical approach. If there's a way to add capacity with minimal impacts,
Yes,
you know, with existing asphalt widths, that seems like a no-brainer.
I do too. I'd like to have that conversation with you and your city administrator, make sure that you want us to pursue that on behalf of the cities. So you kind of give us some marching orders to go do that.
I can speak, actually, I can't speak for. I don't know if the
I just want-
concerns that
We're-
we have report, maybe those concerns don't extend to just widening with what's existing there.
Yeah, we're talking about the potential widening to 3 lanes each direction for the entire corridor, not just
Right.
portions of it.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we would like to have pursued. I think, I'm maybe going back, I think the concern that Lehigh has right now, and I think you mentioned a little bit, both cities did, is that we felt like we had a study that was going to give us some conclusive results. And it seems like we don't have that, right? We don't have a study. We didn't end up with a study with a consensus that we can agree upon. And so I'm not, I do hear what you say when you say that, well, Avenue's going to continue looking into it. But right now, it just seems like to us that the study should have had more emphasis on a broader reach aspect, all the costs related to, what are the true costs for putting it on Pony Express or putting it out in the lake, or widening and putting in interchanges at some intersections in Lehigh. Anyways, it just seemed like that the study was maybe not as conclusive as what we felt like it should have been.
We feel the same way.
But yet, what I hear is we're done.
Yeah,
we're
we're out
just
of
done.
budget for this particular project, and we recognize that UDOT is going to be a primary driver in what happens on Pioneer in the future. So UDOT's going to be the driver of what's going to happen on Pioneer and 2100 North. And it's tied to I-15, as Sean alluded to. What happens on I-15? Because we start to have problems on I-15 in between year 2030 and 2040. So what is the solution to this master problem? And we could not solve it with this study.
But if answering those questions is what's required to get these cities to make a decision, what are our options and recommendations to answer those questions? Is it to get more funding this time around to do a addendum or a modification, you say? Is it to do a new request, a new study? What is MAG's recommendation? Sounds like answering these questions is going to be critical to getting us off of this, you know,
Yeah, what we see is two things. Take care of the things you have control over right now in the immediate future, which is get an alignment on Pony, widen Pioneer to 3 lanes each direction. Pursue that immediately. Then go through the regional transportation plan update process with UDOT, because we're starting that later this fall, into next year. We approve a new plan in 2023. It says, UDOT, what is our plan with I-15? How are we gonna move people east-west across on Pioneer in 21? So we're basically kicking the can down the road on that solution, because we could come up with something that's satisfactory to all the.
do you anticipate the RTP identifying the classification of Pioneer as being different than what it is today? Or is that going to be addressed in that document?
Through the regional transportation plan update,
Right.
we'll relook at everything and say, where are we gonna put that demand? Are we gonna satisfy that demand, or is it always gonna be congested? If we are gonna satisfy it, where do we put it? Do we look at something off the north shore of Utah Lake that takes into account the economic development that could come with that, both revenue and expense side?
So what I hear you saying is the RTP will need to answer the questions that this one didn't.
Oh, yeah.
And that has to be adopted by,
You.
so how are you going to get a consensus to adopt it? How are we going to answer the questions that didn't get answered so we can
If we don't
make
have,
that document do what this document didn't do?
We're gonna re-engage and we're gonna just keep working at it. And we're gonna ask you about what's the plan on Vineyard. Vineyard's EIS was done with a 2030 horizon. That's like tomorrow. And it's not, we haven't started construction yet. So when UDOT goes in to update the environmental on Vineyard, they're gonna have to look at 2050, most likely, the 2050 horizon. That adds 20 years of population on Vineyard and on I-15. So what are we gonna do with I-15? What are we gonna do with Vineyard? How does Pioneer work with that? How does 2100 North work with that? So
I would
it's,
assume that the other side too, right? How do you get, I mean, we show in our city Foothill, or
yeah,
basically the extension of Mountain View corridor. Right, 'cause once you get to the west side of the lake, how are you going to get it over in Eagle Mountain?
yes. So I think that's our hope, is to get that going. Sorry, Chad, we're taking too much time.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to look to.
Okay, well, I'll conclude. It is on our website, the traffic analysis study, the full report, this executive summary I showed you, and then there's a story map that goes through the process of what was done. Our hope is that we can come to consensus as we develop the next long-range plan, but we might have to still label it as, we're not sure where it's going to go, but there are these volumes to go through here. But we'll take another stab at trying to get it further.
okay, well, I guess seeing that there's no action item needed for this meeting today.
Did you give it a thumbs down?
It seems like the cities involved are giving a thumbs down on that, on this study, but seems like we need to discuss this more in depth. But moving on to item number 4 on the agenda today, the pre-disaster mitigation plan update. I think we should be okay.
For you, yes.
So Shauna, go ahead.
You gotta unshare or take over.
Yeah, it's yours.
Click the share screen, is it not?
Sean, what's that? Sean, if you already have that, Sean.
They'll see your torso. You need to sit down level with the camera. Sit at the table.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Pre-disaster mitigation plan. I've talked about it with a number of you already, which is great. I have spoken with someone from almost every city. So if this doesn't sound familiar and you want to get on board, or you want someone else in your city to be involved, please let me know. Next slide. Utah is a wonderful place to live. And like everywhere in the world, we have our unique set of disasters to look out for. 2020 was an interesting year, as they all are. Next slide. Okay, this plan is required by FEMA. And it's all about mitigation. So everything before the disaster occurs to lessen the impacts. It's not about recovery or getting bigger fire engines. It's about making it so the fire doesn't occur to begin with. Next slide. There are some great benefits to mitigation, primarily about, you have about a 6-to-1 ratio. Every dollar spent to mitigate something saves about 6 in recovery should that event occur. So you're saving lives and money up front. Also, participating in this plan makes you eligible for FEMA grants. I've listed a couple examples of previous years back here. So if you have a project in mind, it might be eligible for some serious money. Next slide. The grants are called BRIC grants this year, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. If you want more information, these are hyperlinked in the presentation, so you can get a better idea of if you want to apply, if your project is eligible. Next slide. Story map linked also. Our story maps are super fun, and this one is no exception. Next slide. I've gone through it with some of you already. It goes through the purpose and some mitigation strategies, kind of like we're talking about here. We also have some very fun maps. Everyone loves a good disaster map. We have our basic fire, flood, earthquake related disasters. If you zoom in farther, you'll be able to see your city's schools and transmission lines and kind of a lot of detail in there. So yeah, these are all in that story map if you're interested. Next slide. Because I have talked to just about everyone in Utah County, at least, some topics have come up repeatedly, just things to have on your mind. We have new flood insurance rate maps that you've probably adopted and included in your plans. If not, make sure you're up to date on that. A lot of work has been done installing secondary water meters. There's a discussion on Fix the Breaks. It happens in Salt Lake City currently, and they get like $1 million or so a year for that program. And there's a question of, should we try to get that in the rest of Utah? Is that a good program? So it's one of the few things you can really do to address earthquake. Xeriscaping, lots of chipping programs through the county, which we love. If anything on here strikes your fancy, again, just send me an email if you want to know more. Next slide. Okay, so the light blue up there, I've spoken with most of the cities. We're now on to, I will take everything that I've learned and put it into a beautiful draft plan. In the end of August, or more likely September, we'll have some area meetings, a big lunch meeting for everyone in northern Utah County to get together and look at a draft of the plan, maybe catching loose ends, and have someone from the state come down and talk about BRIC grants should you choose to pursue some. After those secondary area meetings, or really any time we're available to present to your city councils. If you want to scare them about wildfire, I'd love to do that. Also, it'd be great to get this out to the public once we have a nice draft with some public friendly maps to look at. Towards the end of the year, I'll send this final draft off to the Department of Emergency Management and FEMA. We'll do our lovely back and forth with revisions and whatnot. And toward the end of 2022, we should have a final map for your cities to adopt. Final plan for your cities to adopt. As soon as the counties adopt, you're technically covered by the plan should a disaster occur. But eventually everyone will have to adopt this themselves.
When does the current one expire?
April 2022, I think. Maybe a few months afterward.
So are we gonna have a gap where when?
No. We won't have a gap. Good question. When FEMA's nice, we can apply for an extension if we think we might have a gap. But you all should be covered right now. And I think some of you are applying for your own BRIC grants. And you will continue to be covered as long as you adopt this plan next year. Are there any questions? Next slide. That is all. I look forward to hearing from you. Okay, thanks.
I know the brick program is going, full steam, right? Many of us have applied for those funds, so thank you.
Formerly known as the PDM.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Shauna. Moving on to item number 5 then, Jim Price. Jim here? or-
He's online.
He's online. Okay, Jim, could you give us an update on the corridor preservation program?
Be happy to. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It should be pretty quickly. This is an annual update on our corridor preservation program. I apologize that we did not do this last year. It was a little crazy last year. But so we're bringing an update for where we are in the program, the funding available, and the progress that we've made in certain programs. Can I go to the next slide? Our 2021 beginning balance is about $7.5 million. So we have that probably a little bit more for use in the fund. Our expenditures to date this year have been zero. We haven't had any requests. To this day, we've had a lot of discussions with various cities about purchasing property, but none of those have gone forward yet. Our expenditures over the last 5 years have been 8.8 million. So you can see that we're spending about $1.5 million per year on average. That varies tremendously. In 2019, we spent, I believe, $5 million. And so it will vary tremendously year to year, but that kind of gives us an average. Special program expenditures in 2019, we authorized purchase along 1600 North in Orem of up to $3 million, where we were authorized to go out and buy property and then report back on the properties that were purchased. We spent of that $2.8 million. The remaining $100,000 was not enough to do anything with, and so we just ended the program at that point. Any questions on that? Excuse me. Okay, next slide. We currently have 29 properties that are being held for future right-of-way. Since 2007, we have purchased approximately between 40 and 45 properties. I don't have that right to hand. A lot of those have been used for right-of-way, especially on North County Boulevard. And I want to use the Highland City is in process of declaring, for properties. Wow, I do this in person and I do this online, and I apologize for that. Highland City is in the process of declaring 4 properties as excess. And I want to use this to kind of show what we're doing in the corridor preservation program and how we handle properties that are declared excess. Go to the next slide. We currently have the ability to use ortho-rectified and geo-referenced photography using our drone to determine the extents of the impacts of a roadway. This is this is Murdoch Connector Road in Highland. And you can see where on the north side of the roadway, the sound wall that was put in. So we use that essentially as the boundary for the roadway for our purposes in this. And you can see the 5 properties, Canal Boulevard. Thank you, Mike. My apologies. You can see the 5 properties indicated by the stars, that these are properties that we purchased in 2009. Can you go back, please? One more. Right there. Thank you. These are properties that we purchased in 2009 with the corridor preservation program. And what we did was we are able to now use our drone to take these ortho-rectified and geo-referenced photos and to overlay the county parcel data on those photos. And we can see, give us a very clear picture of what impacts the roadway has had on the properties that we've purchased and how much property we have left from the roadway project. So if we go from left to right, the first one there, you can see is a rectangular property. We've used most of that for the roadway. There's about 3,000 square feet that has not been used. Highland City is a negotiation with that property owner for sale. The property owner is willing to buy that property. It's not really of much or any economic value, and the city doesn't want to have to hold on to it and to take care of it. So they are negotiating a price with the property owner to take that over. And we think that's exactly the right way to go. The second property is much smaller, about square property that was completely utilized in the roadway project. And go to the middle one, you can see that a little less than half of that property was used in the roadway project. And so the city is now determining that is excess, and the city will have an appraisal done on that, and will offer that on the market for the appraised price. The same with the two properties to the east. Those were two homes that were purchased back in 2009. They've since been demolished. The city has looked at whether or not they should combine that into one property or leave it as two properties. It looks like it's going to be economically more feasible to leave it as two properties and to sell those separately, put those on the open market. And they are in the process of doing that, of declaring those excess through the city council. And Andy Spencer, who is the engineer at Highland, and I've been talking about this quite extensively. And they will be having an appraisal done on these properties and put those up again for sale. One of the things that I wanted to clarify with this and what is happening here in Highland and what will happen in other properties that are going to go up for sale in the near future that were bought with corridor preservation is that regardless of how much we actually paid for these properties, what they will be sold for will be the current market valuation. And that current market value or the proceeds will all go back into the corridor preservation program, minus the cost of actually selling those properties. And the city can utilize some of those proceeds to cover their costs of selling the properties. Any thoughts or any questions on that? Does that make sense to everybody? What we're showing here?
It helps grow the fund, right? Because the appreciation.
It does. It does help grow the fund, assuming that those properties are appreciating value. Of course, we're not selling the entire property anymore that we purchased, but we're just making sure that we're selling the property that's unused by the roadway.
Jim, just a question, just for clarification to make sure I heard it correctly. So with the fund, we purchased all 5 of those properties that have a star on them, and then we're selling back. The city's responsible to negotiate and sell the remainders, and then those proceeds go back into this fund?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Jim, those proceeds are minus any costs the city may incur for appraisals or whatnot, is that correct?
Correct, right. This will be kind of interesting. The reason this is interesting to me is this is actually the first set of properties that we have purchased with the corridor preservation program, and we'll be subdividing off of the roadway right away and reselling on the open market. Again, these were purchased in 2009, so it kind of gives you an idea of how far ahead of some of these roadway projects that will purchase property with right of way. And what happens once the roadway goes in and what happens with those properties.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's a great explanation and just a great time for us to see that corridor preservation program working like it was intended to. Do we have any other comments from members on that committee? Okay, well, thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Brad.
So moving forward to item number 6, tip modification from Spanish Fork on the 800 North intersection. This is a scope modification. Bob, would you like to take over on that one?
Sure. Should work. Which one is the? All right, well, we'll take a stab at this. There we go. So the first one, we have 2 tip modifications and then the greater tip adoption. So the first one, if some of you recognize, this is Spanish Fork 800 North, 800 East intersection. The project was selected in 2018. It was awarded a little under $2.5 million. They were county funds. And the intent of the project was to, it's doing it on your screen, not on the thing up there. So anyways, I'm going to stand up here really quick, at least so people in the room can see. So the intent of the project was to modify this intersection and tie it in a little bit better with US 6. That's US 6 heading south to Moab right there. And it was intended to integrate it there. Can everybody hear me online if I stand right here and talk?
Yep,
And let me know. One of the things that came out of this project, so all this half was done completed with the project, but now that it's complete, the problem is that the lanes on the east side of US 6 don't match up anymore, and so there's a little bit of a conflict there. So there is $584,783 remaining on this project that was awarded. Spanish Fork is requesting to use the remaining funds to go in and modify the opposite side to make sure the lanes line up, the intersection at US 6. And Spanish Fork has agreed to fund any cost overruns that there may be as part of that second, that scope addition. So basically, all we're doing is adding we have money left over and we're adding aspects to the scope to make it a more complete project. So with that, there's a proposed motion. Are there any questions on this specific project? Again, no new funds, just using remaining funds to expand the scope to, again, like I said, maybe make it a little bit more complete, line things up on the other side that we didn't know would need to be done as the project kicked off and started. Questions, comments? Yes.
Bob, did Spanish Fork apply for any of their contingency funds on this project?
Yeah.
Or these
Oh,
are-
yes.
Is it-
No.
is it
This
the-
project was completely without contingency.
Okay.
Other than that, they're.
Quick question.
Want to make it.
Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and again, I'm actually not super familiar with the project, so I apologize for that. I was just looking at the photo there. I'm just wondering if you're redoing some things in there, is it possible to break up those pedestrian crossings a little bit, especially with that trail on the west side, by maybe getting some kind of at least pedestrian refuge island or something in there to help make it a little bit better crossing in that case?
Break that in. A lot of it has to do with, there's a little bit of a right-of-way issue there on that northeast corner. That is an Arby's. If you've been through there, you probably know where the Arby's is. So I'm sure there's some there, they'll do their best to do that, but it is a tight right-of-way and potentially some expensive right-of-way to work on right there. So.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, just a quick question. So
Good question. Any more questions? Like I said, there's a proposed motion if
Okay.
somebody would like to.
Well, if there are no other questions, I'd be willing to accept a motion regarding this tip modification.
Brad, I'll go ahead and make the motion to move that we recommend the scope of the 800 North, 800 East intersection project be modified as presented.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Do we have a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, we have a second. From Jason. Thanks, Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please say nay. Okay, motion
Excellent.
carries then. Thank you, Bob.
All right, moving on to the next one. So this is another Spanish Fork request. So we've got two projects we're talking about here, and I'll try and go through both of them. So the first one, we have the Center Street widening project. This project was selected in 2016. It was awarded about 5.1 million. Part of that is additional funds that were awarded with a minor scope change. Well, a pretty good scope change after the project was initiated. The project was basically to widen Center Street, if you can see right here. So everything west of here is 5 lanes. It was 3 lanes going over to, again, this is US 6. This project was to widen the remainder of the road to 5 lanes all the way to US 6. The scope change made some modifications to how it worked with the junior high, as well as lining up intersection with, is that 1150 East, right? So lining that intersection up with those scope changes and modifications were brought to TAC and regional planning and were approved at the time. One of the issues that was unforeseen with this project, though, is if you can see in that corner, you can see it's Tesoro, I believe it is, a gas station there. As the design got further into construction, they realized that they had to move the pumps and do some other modifications. So due to those changes, the project is over by about $2 million. So keep that in the back of your mind for a minute. Let's see if this will advance. Why don't you advance it for me? There, go back. Go back one more. There we go. So second project. This is the US 6 pedestrian crossing. This was a project selected again in 2018. It was awarded a total of about 1.8 million. The intention of this project was to build a pedestrian crossing from this northeast corner across the railroad tracks and US 6 to this side. If you remember, right here is where that junior high was. They had a lot of kids crossing that bridge. It was a dangerous intersection. It was a priority at the time. UDOT, since it was crossing their intersection, they requested jurisdiction for it. And as further study and look into the project happened, the cost now risen to almost $6.5 million. So quite a big funding gap. Well, in the meantime, Nebo School District has gone ahead and modified the school boundaries, and therefore it no longer requires kids to cross this intersection to get to school. So Spanish Fork is requesting that the US 6 undercrossing project, you can see them both kind of together now, requesting that the project be eliminated, so the pedestrian crossing be eliminated, and the $1.79 million be transferred to the Center Street widening project to cover some of the cost overruns. Spanish Fork has said that in a different location, they're making pedestrian, they're making some adjustments in the future to allow better pedestrian crossing of US 6, a far less expensive location. And now that now those kids are not needing to cross, the major need has gone away. So what they're proposing is, again, to eliminate this project. That project will go away, and the $1.79 million would be transferred to the Center Street project to recover some of the cost overruns. Questions?
Bob, maybe I'll just make a quick comment that there's another effort to work on the Provo Sub Railroad consolidation project, which would eliminate one of these railroad lines that is tied up against 6.
Yep.
That will help with the future design of a pedestrian crossing as well. So that's in play right now as well.
Yep. Are there any other questions I can answer? Otherwise, again, there's a proposed motion. Yes, sir.
So if I'm remembering the numbers right, there was a funding shortage of 2.3
Yes.
or something, whatever it was.
It's right about $2 million, a little over $2 million. So Spanish Fork, and you guys can chime in if I say this wrong. Spanish Fork is willing to take that hit. They've been kind of willing to take the $2 million hit, but if we can bridge that hit a lot, it'll make it easier on them. So yes, there still is going to be a shortfall. Spanish Fork is saying they're going to take that shortfall, but it would sure be nice to, now that they don't need US 6 crossing, to be able to absorb those cost overruns.
Just to make sure I understand, so the only thing we're being asked today is take that 1.8 million and put it into this project. Cancel the one.
Cancel the one, take its money and put it into the
No
other.
extra money going in.
No extra money out of our pockets. It's just a no longer needed project. Eliminating it and taking those funds and putting it into the existing project.
Yeah, Spanish Fork.
Yes. Yes. Questions? Yes, sir.
Has Spanish Fork already come to us requesting the contingency monies on the first?
Yes, so that was that, when we said there was a tip modification, funding modification, that was probably what, 2 or 3 years ago when this project was in design. The original project had this road coming in. And as they started going in with design and so forth, having this intersection between here is not ideal. And this is a relatively busy intersection. So this connection was moved over. There was some more right of way that needed to be purchased, some adjustments here. And then the big dog was moving the pumps from that gas station to mitigating the impacts to the gas station. That's the big cost it takes. Well, there's a lot of, there's a couple of houses in right of way.
Okay, so the
right of
2
way
million was
spare
that
off.
like?
Commercial
that
right
wasn't
away.
all moved in?
It was
There's
the 11 houses.
yeah, there's a bunch of houses. There was at least
Okay,
a few houses here. There was a few houses
so
here.
that $2 million, that's not just the funds.
Yeah, no. No, we mean, there, like I said,
The pumps are only
The-
680,000.
the modification made a lot more changes than happened in the pumps.
So, Bob, a question and a comment, maybe a comment first and then a question. Seems like in the past, when we've had a project that has gone away or whatever like that, we basically put the money back into the pot and reallocated it throughout whatever was the next one in line. Rather than saying, okay, the city has awarded this much money, the city can change it from this project to that project. I think there's a pretty good nexus between these two, but I worry a little bit about the precedence that sets in having one project go away and okay, it's all staying in the city. So maybe just a discussion on that if anybody wants to discuss it. The second part of my question is, are both of these projects county funds or do we have mixing funds here?
Both our county funds, yes, Richard. And typically, you're mostly right. Typically, if we had a project go end like this, typically the project would end and it would go back to the pot to be reallocated to the next selection cycle, not necessarily down the list. But yes, that's correct. Typically, if the project is ended, it goes back into the pot and is allocated in the next selection cycle.
To speak on that, this project started with Cub Ridge. This is actually like, the tunnel would be like a third phase of the 3-phase project. Cub Ridge was the first project, then we widened Center Street. And while we were doing this, we added the pedestrian undercrossing for the school, for the children. And then that going away and then that price going up to 6.5 million. And this project just was underfunded from the beginning. And it all comes down to the right of way. We projected the houses would be about $200,000 to buy each house. We were buying houses for $450,000 when we started this project. Right away went through the roof, housing market went up, the roads widened, the pumps were right next to the right of way. The gas station owner wasn't going to see to us not moving his pumps. So that's where we got to this point. But to say that put the money back, it's all been one project. Just one part of it got eliminated. If that helps you, Richard.
It does, and I understand the project, Jared. I think the thing I'm looking at is where it was awarded in 2 different years, 2 different projects. I'm cautious about the precedents.
Understood. And we're not trying to set one where the money would go back. It's one project was done, was in conjunction. We're trying to do one right after another.
And Sean just whispered in my ear and reminded me, this is something that our processes allow. It's not necessarily a new thing that we've done. We don't do it very often, obviously, because it's not very often that a project just goes away or is ready to go away. And so, but our process does allow for this to happen.
Yeah, that works. And assuming this does get approved here and through regional planning, Jared, one thing we would need to do is modify the interlocal with the city and the county on the dollars.
Okay. I thought I noticed Kim Struthers had a comment pop up or somebody had a comment pop up in the chat.
Yeah, Kim says, can you review again what plans, if any, are still in the works for ped crossing of US 6 if this money is approved?
So Spanish Fork told us, and then maybe Jared can better answer this, but there will be ped crossing work done, but just not at this location where it's so expensive.
Well, no, this crossing will be a pedestrian crossing just controlled with the signal. We're just going to bring the trail on the east side. The trail on the west side, part of the project was done with the Center Street crossing, with the Center Street widening. There was to be a trail from the school up to US 6. That is actually in place. So it was put in. So part of this.
So the trail does get
to US 6. On the other side, the trail just crosses the bridge and does not head south along where you can see it's unimproved. That's our intention, is to bring the trail and modify the intersection on the east side of Cut Bridge to allow pedestrians to cross safely.
There you go.
So the crossing will be an at-grade crossing controlled with the signal.
There you go. Any other questions that can answer? All very good questions.
I had some of the same concerns that Richard brought up, but if you're telling us this is part of the process and it's okay, I'd make the motion to approve, to recommend the US 6 undercrossing project be eliminated from the TIP, and the $1,790,435 be transferred to the Center Street widening project.
That sounds an awful lot like a motion, Jason.
It's a motion.
It's a motion. We have a motion then to approve. Do we have a second? Second, Jeremy Lappin then. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. Okay, it looks like that motion goes forward. Item number 8 then, Bob, you want to go ahead and give us a.
Really quick.
Yeah.
For some reason, this isn't working, so Mel, can you advance me? All right, TIP approval. So this is going to be a little rudimentary for this group, I think, but Metropolitan Planning Organization, MAG, has a responsibility of preparing and approving the TIP for our area. The TIP lists transportation projects and programs within the MPO for the fiscal years of 2022 through 2026, with conceptual projects out until 2027. All regional projects, regardless of the selection agency, must be by MPO committees and listed in the TIP. Everybody in here basically knows what the TIP is. Even though we are not adding projects to it this year, we have our every 2-year cycle. This is the second year where we're off. We still need to adopt the TIP to include UTA UDOT projects, as well as certify our process, so on and so forth. Now we advance me. This is our, many of you probably should have seen this. This is our TIP application. It's up on our website. take a look at it, show you the projects, interactive mapping tool, et cetera, et cetera. Now we'll keep going. There are a couple of highlights here that I'm going to point out. These are, just because we're not adding projects doesn't mean UDOT is not adding projects. If many of you remember last month, we added some big projects to get them up and going. These are a few more that have either come through the legislature or the TIF selection process at the state. We have State Street widening from Pleasant Grove to American Fork. This is additional money to get that 5 lanes, 6 lanes, well, 7 lanes, if you count the turn lane, 7 lanes in that gap that does not exist at that width. Springville, this is additional money on 600 South or Spanish Forks 2700 North. There's the new interchange work that's going to be going on there where that overpass is. This will be extending the project out to SR 51, Orem 1600 North. These are $35 million funds. These are funds that are going to widen 1600 North from State Street to 12 West and basically to the freeway. We have the Foothill Boulevard environmental that will be done. This is in Saratoga Springs, looking at widening Foothill, basically the Mountain View corridor southwards into Saratoga Springs. This one, I didn't have the date originally when I put this together. It's 2022 funds. SR 114 and 200 North in Provo. Did I say I put it probably? I did a typo on. All right. Well, sorry about that. There is this SR 114 200 North in Provo. That is a signal project that they're adding funds to. And then SR 68 Village Parkway to Grandview, Saratoga Springs, they're adding additional fund money to that project as well. So those are just a few highlights of the biggies that are going into the TIP from UDOT. There's lots of pavement rehabilitation projects and money that goes through the TIP process, but it's basically not capacity-ish building. Go on to the next slide, please. So we have been and are currently in a 30-day public comment period. It began July 1st and it will close August 3rd. We have not received any regionally significant comments as of now. And so you can see that I kind of reflect that in a proposed motion. Since we can continue, you can adopt, you can make the motion. We just kind of put in the caveat barring there's no regionally significant comments. Regionally significant comment would be a comment, Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a comment that would require us to go back and do air quality, to do all of our air quality analysis again. But as of now, we have not received any. And so basically, again, this is just a tip. We adopt it every year. Again, we are not adding projects this year. Coming up either next month or the following month, we'll be starting our kickoff for our selection process that will add projects next year. So we'll be looking for that, but for now, it's just adopting the tip as we do every year. Any comments, questions? Otherwise, there is a proposed motion.
Thanks, Bob. Do we have any questions or a motion?
I move to recommend that RPC approve the 2022 TIP as presented, barring, I'm going to say barring.
Barring, thank you.
No regionally significant comments are received. It'd be a hard time on.
You wouldn't be the first person.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward then. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay,
Thank you.
that's all we have there.
Can I just say for, Kim had a comment in here for Spanish Fork. about the grade separation, just encouraging them to continue the idea of pursuing a grade separation there. If that's possible, it's for Kim Struthers and Lehigh.
That's a great separation on the project we just.
Yeah,
That's
on
the
US
project before it.
Spanish Fork one.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, that was just an after comment. The explanation made great sense, but yeah, anyways, I just thought I'd that, so thanks.
Okay, do we have any other business from UTA? Ken, do you have anything or anyone?
I don't have anything myself. Mary, got anything you want to bring up at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, what about from UDOT? Matt, do you have anything for us? Okay, well, if not, I would, essentially our next TAC committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 23rd, 2021 at 1:30. I'm assuming that we would do it much like this one, with both in person and online. Any other questions from the TAC committee at this time?
This will be the location for the foreseeable future, right?
Yes, we have a agreement with the Central Utah Water Conservancy District to let us use this room at least this year. And so they've been really great. Dave Pitcher, who walked out, was here, he helped set this up. And we just felt like with the social needs we needed, if we needed to separate, this room's big. So when we do our tip selection and all those things, this would be a great location to be.
Well, no disrespect, but they're a little nicer offices than yours.
That's it. We're not bumping elbows the whole time.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a motion to adjourn.
So maybe.
So moved by Jeremy. Second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Okay, we will adjourn then until